Your operating costs are too high, and I see at least 3 areas for immediate cuts. The man in the sharp gray blazer said, tapping his tablet. Let's start with employee compensation. I sat frozen across the desk from him, struggling to find words. His name was Ethan Clarke, the new regional director sent from CareBridge Animal Health. He had a firm handshake, polished shoes, and absolutely no idea what this place meant to me. Nothing personal. Dr. Monroe, he added smoothly. It's just business. I'm Rebekah Monroe, 45 years old. I've worked at Pine Hill Veterinary Clinic in Asheville, North Carolina, for the past 15 years. What started as a modest job fresh out of veterinary school became the core of my life. I helped expand the clinic from a tiny operation with 1 exam room into a respected full-service facility, trusted by the entire community. Now I was being told my salary would be slashed by 40%. Just like that. We're aligning your pay with regional industry benchmarks, Ethan said, already glancing back at his tablet. When would these changes take effect? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Next pay period, he replied. We'll need your decision by Friday. When Dr. Jameson, the founder of Pine Hill, had retired and sold the clinic, he promised us that CareBridge would respect our legacy. They're investing in what we've built, he said at the farewell luncheon. But now, 3 weeks after the papers were signed, it was clear those promises had evaporated. I stood, voice calm but firm. I appreciate your clarity. You'll have my answer by Friday. Ethan nodded, not even glancing up. As I turned to leave, he called out, "Oh, and Rebekah, there's a new scheduling software going live next week. The training packet's in your inbox." Outside his office, I stopped at the front desk where Lena, our receptionist of over a decade, was typing up patient notes. Her expression was tight. "You too?" I asked softly. She nodded, eyes glassy. 30% cut. And I lose 2 shifts a week. What are you going to do? I whispered, glancing at the waiting room families and their pets. A sleepy golden retriever leaning against a veteran in a wheelchair, a little girl hugging a kitten in a towel. Lena sighed. I don't know, but this place doesn't feel like home anymore. I nodded, looking around at the clinic that had once been my world. A quiet fire lit inside me. This wasn't just about money. It was about everything we'd built being sold off 1 line item at a time. But something told me things were about to change around here, and not for the better. A quiet determination settled inside me like stone. This wasn't just about a paycheck. It was about the heart of what we'd created. I looked around Pine Hill Veterinary Clinic, the walls I'd painted myself, the exam rooms I'd designed, the team I'd trained. And I knew I couldn't let it be gutted for the sake of someone else's spreadsheet. Being a good veterinarian has never been just about medicine. It's about trust, about relationships. Sure, with the animals, but just as deeply with their people. Over 15 years, I'd vaccinated kittens who grew up into arthritic seniors. I'd sat on the floor next to grieving families as we said gentle goodbyes. I'd mailed sympathy cards, celebrated miracle recoveries, and answered panicked phone calls at 2 a.m. from parents whose Labrador swallowed a sock. In countless contacts, I was saved as Dr. Rebekah. My fridge at home was covered in kids' drawings of their pets, my walls filled with thank you cards. These weren't just clients. They were connections that mattered. The next day over lunch, I leaned toward Caleb, our newest associate vet, a quiet but sharp 32-year-old who joined us from Atlanta. You've worked at a CareBridge clinic before, right? He nodded, expression flat. 3 years. Always starts the same. First they cut hours, then they install metrics. Metrics, I asked, though. I already had a feeling. How many appointments you squeeze into a day, how many premium tests you push. How much revenue per pet visit, he said, stabbing at his salad without appetite. They wanted me to recommend monthly dental cleanings for senior cats who didn't even have teeth left. I exhaled slowly, the pieces falling into place. That? Why you left? He nodded again. I couldn't look people in the eye anymore. Later that afternoon, between appointments, I stepped outside and called Dr. Jameson. After 35 years, he was retired now, living in a quiet cabin just north of Asheville. Rebekah, he said warmly, how's the clinic holding up? I paused, then told him the truth. I didn't know Rebekah, he said after a long silence. They told me they'd preserve the culture. If I had known, it's okay, I replied. You earned your rest. But I need to figure out what to do next. What are you thinking? I hesitated. The idea had been stirring in me for days. Saying it out loud made it real. I'm thinking of opening my own practice. The silence on the line lasted only a second. You should, Dr. Jameson finally said. You've got the experience, the trust, and Asheville could use a clinic that still puts care before corporate targets. After we hung up, I sat alone in my office, the soft hum of the air vent barely masking the weight of my thoughts. My framed diplomas and certifications lined the walls, each one earned through years of dedication, not just to medicine, but to people and their pets. I thought about conversations with longtime clients, how often they'd thanked me for taking the time for explaining things in plain language, for never rushing them through decisions. You're not like those big corporate chains, they'd say. That memory stirred something deeper than frustration. It stirred purpose. A gentle knock pulled me from my thoughts. It was Maggie, our head technician for the past 8 years. Sorry to interrupt Dr. Monroe, but Mrs. Kilpatrick is here with Buddy. She asked for you specifically, even though she's on Dr. Lee's schedule today. I'll be right there, I said, standing. Buddy was a 10-year-old beagle I'd treated since he was a squirmy puppy. As I washed my hands, the decision crystallized: this wasn't about salary cuts anymore. It was about standing up for the kind of care we believe in. If stories like this speak to your heart, tap that subscribe button. There's more to come, and you won't want to miss what happens next. That night, I worked until nearly midnight, researching real estate pricing, veterinary equipment, and sketching out a business plan. I called 3 colleagues who had successfully opened independent clinics. The more I learned, the more I knew this was the right path. By Friday morning, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. At exactly 9 o'clock, I knocked on Ethan Clarke's office door. Come in, he called, distracted. He was mid-video call, but clicked it off with a brief, I'll call you back. Then he turned to me, eyebrows raised. Rebekah, have you decided I have? I said, handing him an envelope. This is my 2 weeks' notice. For a moment, his polished demeanor cracked. You're quitting. Over a standard market adjustment, I'm pursuing a new opportunity, I said calmly, and I wanted to inform you respectfully, with time to transfer patient responsibilities. He leaned back, folding his arms. I expected some of the techs might jump ship. But you're a senior vet. This is how corporate transitions work, he added almost defensively. Everyone has to adapt. I understand business realities, I replied evenly, and I've made a business decision of my own. He said nothing more, just reached for my letter. HR will process your exit. I assume you're joining another clinic? Something like that? I said with a small smile. By lunchtime, word had spread. Maggie, Caleb, and Lena each found a quiet moment to ask, is it true? I nodded, and every one of them leaned in and whispered the same thing, keep us posted. Is it true? Lena asked, her voice barely above a whisper as we stood by the filing cabinets near the break room. I nodded. Yes. My last day is in 2 weeks. Her brows furrowed. So, what will you do? I paused, then decided to be honest. I'm opening my own practice. Her eyes widened. Seriously? Where I've been looking at a space on Henderson Street just east of downtown? I said. It used to be a pediatric clinic, already zoned good bones. Lena glanced around and lowered her voice even more. That's incredible, Rebekah. If anyone can pull it off, it's you. The rest of the day was a quiet current of the same. Maggie stopped by the supply closet to say, keep me posted. Wherever you go, I want in. Caleb gave a nod in the hallway, murmuring, respect. Let me know if you need another vet. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad working through lists, equipment licensing budget. My tea had gone cold, but I didn't notice. My phone buzzed with a message from Maggie. Whatever you're planning, count me in. It wasn't until that moment, staring at my messy handwriting and cold mug, that the day's emotions hit me fully. As I left the clinic earlier, Mrs. Davidson had caught me by the parking lot, her Maine Coon Oliver in tow. Dr. Monroe, she said, a little breathless. I overheard one of the techs. Are you leaving? I'd nodded. Yes, I am. She didn't hesitate. Where are you going? because Oliver and I will follow. That sentence stopped me in my tracks. It wasn't about clinic loyalty or convenience. These people trusted me. I wasn't just a veterinarian. I was their veterinarian. And that meant something CareBridge never understood. Back at home, staring at my notes, I felt a shift deep in my chest. This wasn't about escaping a pay cut anymore. This was about protecting a standard of care, about building something better. The next 2 weeks were some of the most intense of my career. I stayed fully professional, giving every patient my full attention. But I felt the tension with Ethan rising by the day. He hovered during appointments, clipboard in hand, making notes on workflow efficiency. He scheduled an exit interview for my final day and sent near-daily reminders about my supposed non-solicitation obligations, a clause I'd reviewed with a lawyer friend who assured me it held no weight under North Carolina law for medical professionals. What Ethan didn't know was that I had already signed the lease. The new space was just 6 minutes from Pine Hill, and the old pediatric clinic setup gave me a head start. I'd secured financing through my local bank, where I'd been a customer for over a decade. Even better, every equipment supplier I'd worked with over the years had already offered me terms built on trust. They were ready when I was. We value relationships too. My medical supplier rep told me over a quiet lunch at a small bistro tucked into a side street in Asheville. And frankly, we've seen what happens when CareBridge takes over. Quality drops, corners get cut. We're happy to support independent clinics like the one you're planning. His words gave me a sense of reassurance. I hadn't gone public yet, but the right people were already showing support. Back at Pine Hill, I kept my plans private. But the questions kept coming, careful, coded, but unmistakable. During one exam, Mrs. Farrell asked as I cleaned her terrier's ears. "So where will your new clinic be located?" I glanced toward the exam room monitor, installed just last week with a tiny blinking light at the top right. "I haven't finalized anything yet," I replied evenly. She leaned closer. "Well, when you do, let me know. Max won't let anyone else touch him." Comments like that rolled in every day, and with each one I felt more grounded. This wasn't just a job change. This was preservation, of trust, of service, of care. On Wednesday of my final week, Ethan called me into his office again. The charm had faded. His voice was clipped. "We've had several clients asking where you're going. I need to remind you of your contractual obligations." "I'm fully aware," I answered calmly, "and I've been careful not to confirm anything." He tapped a pen against his desk. "We've invested significantly in acquiring Pine Hill Dr. Monroe. CareBridge won't tolerate any effort to undermine that investment." I met his gaze without flinching. "Understood. Is there anything else?" He paused. "We're prepared to revisit your compensation. Maybe we came in too hard with the initial cut." It was the first moment I saw doubt in his eyes. Maybe the client reactions were louder than he expected. But it didn't matter anymore. My lease was signed. Equipment was being delivered. My vision for Blue Ridge veterinary care was already becoming real. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but my decision is made." That afternoon, Lena quietly slipped a folded note onto my desk as she walked past. Inside were 20 handwritten names, clients who had called specifically asking for me. At the bottom, she'd written, "When you're ready to hire a receptionist, call me first." That evening, I met Maggie and Caleb at a quiet coffee shop just outside city limits. Over lattes and shared glances, I finally told them everything. "I've secured a space on Riverbend Drive," I said. "Opening in a few weeks if all goes to plan." Maggie smiled. "Tell me when to start." Caleb raised his cup. "Count me in. It'll be called Blue Ridge Veterinary Care," I said, stirring my coffee. "We're aiming to open in about 6 weeks, assuming everything stays on track." 6 weeks? Maggie repeated, raising an eyebrow. "My reduced hours kick in 3 weeks from now." "Convenient timing," Caleb added, leaning in. "So what's your staffing plan?" I looked at them both. "I need a veterinarian who believes in the same kind of care I do and a lead technician who knows how to build trust with clients." Their smiles said everything. When we left that coffee shop, Blue Ridge had its first team members, unofficially, of course. It was starting to feel real, but I had no idea that CareBridge was about to force my hand sooner than expected. The next morning, my second to last day at Pine Hill, I walked into the break room and froze. Taped to the bulletin board was a laminated sheet, new FEE schedule. Effective immediately. The price hikes were blatant. Vaccinations that had been $45 were now $65. Routine dental cleanings had jumped from $300 to $420. But the worst part, the new wellness bundles promoted in bold and bundled with unnecessary tests. The Gold Senior Package included multiple panels most irrelevant to healthy pets. "They're not even pretending anymore," whispered Jenna, one of our newer techs. "Doctor, Lee just told me we're supposed to recommend the premium bundle to every single client today." I felt my stomach twist. This wasn't streamlining. This was exploitation. Later that day, Mrs. Whitaker brought in Chairman Meow, her elderly tabby, for a routine arthritis check. We had just run his senior panel 2 months ago, all clear. Still under the new protocol, I was expected to push another round this one, totaling nearly $500. "Is this really necessary?" "So soon?" she asked gently, worry in her voice. "You know I'm on a fixed income." I nodded. "Corporate has adopted a new standard protocol," I said carefully. "But in my opinion, given Chairman's recent results, there's no need to repeat those tests yet. We could comfortably wait 4 more months." Relief washed over her face. But I didn't get to finish the appointment. Ethan Clarke appeared at the doorway. "Mrs. Whitaker, I'm Ethan, Regional Director." He stepped in with a salesman's smile. "I noticed we haven't scheduled Chairman's wellness bundle yet." What followed was textbook pressure concerns about early detection stories of missed diagnoses, and finally a limited-time discount that still pushed the cost far beyond reason. Mrs. Whitaker's shoulders tensed as she finally agreed, gripping her purse tighter. After she left, Ethan pulled me aside. "Dr. Monroe, when we implement a protocol, we expect our staff to support it fully." I met his gaze and said quietly, "Those tests aren't about care. They're about revenue." He didn't deny it. He just smiled and walked away. I watched Mrs. Whitaker's expression shift from confusion to guilt, then resignation as she finally nodded and scheduled the overpriced test. Her fingers tightened around her purse as if she were holding back something more than money. After she left, Ethan cornered me by the sink. "Dr. Monroe, when we set a protocol, we expect our veterinarians to uphold it." I kept my voice calm, though my heart pounded. "That test wasn't needed. Not yet. This isn't about health care. It's about revenue. It's about consistency," he replied coolly. "Your emotional ties to clients are clouding your clinical objectivity." I almost laughed. My relationships with clients are why this clinic has survived for decades. That trust is earned. He glanced at his watch like I was a time slot he needed to move on from. Well, thankfully, this is only an issue for 1 more day. The rest of Thursday blurred by in a haze of tension. Ethan hovered during my exams, stepping in whenever I didn't promote the Care Plus wellness package hard enough. By the time I locked up that night, I was emotionally drained. Back at my desk, I logged into the system to finalize notes and froze. In Chairman Meow's chart, a new administrative note had been entered. Patient reassigned to Dr. Lee effective immediately. Dr. Monroe no longer primary. My pulse quickened. I checked several other longtime patient files. Same change. They were stripping me of my caseload before I'd even walked out the door. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My plan had been simple: leave, quietly get Blue Ridge Veterinary Care up and running and inform clients once we were ready. But CareBridge had crossed the line. They weren't just playing hardball, they were erasing trust. At 2:07 a.m., I climbed out of bed, sat down at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. Subject: urgent. Acceleration request. Body need to advance opening timeline. How soon can we be operational, even part-time? My lawyer replied 15 minutes later. With temporary equipment and flexible hours, 2 weeks. Call me first thing. I exhaled for the first time all day. Friday. The final day arrived with a strange stillness. I brewed strong coffee, made a checklist, and triple-checked the lease documents and vendor contacts. My phone buzzed constantly, quiet confirmations and support from Maggie, Lena, and Caleb. I pulled into Pine Hills lot for the last time and felt something between grief and liberation. Inside the clinic was unusually subdued. "Schedule looks light today," Lena commented as I passed the front desk. "Ethan blocked most of it for transition meetings," I explained, glancing at the near-empty appointment book. But what he didn't know was that I'd already transitioned into the next chapter of my career. And I wasn't going quietly. "Apparently, I have a lot of paperwork to complete before I leave," I told Lena with a half smile. What neither of us said aloud was the obvious: my long-term clients had already been reassigned to other veterinarians. CareBridge wasn't waiting for me to finish my shift. They were erasing me as efficiently as they'd erased everything else that made Pine Hill special. At noon, Ethan summoned me to the conference room. He called it a departure protocol meeting, and I assumed it would be the usual hand over my keys, sign a few forms, maybe get a strained thank you for my years of service. Instead, I walked into a setup that felt more like an ambush. Ethan sat at the head of the table, flanked by two people I'd never seen before. One introduced herself as CareBridge's regional legal counsel, the other as their HR director. "Before we process your departure," Ethan began, tone-clipped and formal, "we need to address a few concerns." The attorney slid a manila envelope toward me. "We've prepared a cease and desist regarding any intent to practice veterinary medicine within a 20-mile radius of this clinic for 1 year." I didn't even reach for the paper. "I don't recall signing a non-compete," I said. "It's included in the transition documents all staff signed when CareBridge acquired Pine Hill." The attorney responded smoothly. I opened my bag and pulled out a folder I'd been carrying for days. "Actually, I brought copies of everything I signed. There's no non-compete in any of them." I laid the papers on the table and met her eyes. "My attorney reviewed this yesterday. He agrees." The mood in the room shifted. The HR director glanced at the legal counsel. Ethan's face tightened. "Regardless," Ethan said quickly, "we're not here to debate legalities. We just want to ensure a smooth transition for our clients." I raised an eyebrow. "My clients?" The HR director, clearly sensing the tension, softened her tone. "Dr. Monroe, we understand you've had a long and meaningful tenure here. Perhaps there's a way to resolve this without escalating further." "I'm always open to reasonable solutions," I said. 2 hours later, we had a deal. I wouldn't actively solicit Pine Hill clients for 30 days, and CareBridge would drop all claims to restrict where and when I opened my practice. I gathered my belongings slowly, taking one last walk through the halls that had once felt like home. There were no speeches, no thank yous, just a quiet, necessary goodbye. As I pulled out of the parking lot, my phone buzzed. Valerie just overheard Ethan on the phone with corporate. He said, "She's just one vet. How much damage can she really do?" I smiled, setting my GPS to Blue Ridge Veterinary Care. "Let's find out." He said, "She's just one veterinarian. How much impact could her leaving possibly have?" Valerie's message lit up my screen as I sat in my car outside the new clinic. I smiled and tapped out a reply. I guess we're about to find out. What Ethan and CareBridge didn't understand was that I wasn't just leaving, I was already 2 steps ahead. The gears were turning, and nothing was going to stop what came next. Blue Ridge Veterinary Care opened its doors just 17 days after my final shift at Pine Hill. The schedule had been brutal: late nights, loaned equipment, secondhand exam tables, and a team running on adrenaline and coffee. But we did it. Caleb joined as our second veterinarian. Maggie came aboard as our lead tech after her hours at Pine Hill were slashed. And Lena gave notice the same day we installed the new reception desk, citing unresolvable ethical concerns in her resignation letter. We planned a quiet launch, a soft opening meant to test systems, train staff, and ease into a full schedule. I had only called about 20 longtime clients with urgent needs. That was all. At 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes before opening, I stepped out front with a coffee in hand and nearly dropped it. A line of clients and their pets stretched around the building and down the block. Caleb stepped beside me. "Did you call all these people?" I shook my head slowly. "No, only a few." Lena, already settled behind our front desk, glanced up and grinned. "I think word got around." And it had. Mrs. Kilpatrick showed up with Buddy the Beagle. The Delgados brought their trio of rescue cats. Even Mr. Harmon walked in with Tucker, his ancient tortoise. "We saw it on the community Facebook page," Mrs. Kilpatrick said with a hug. No one wanted to miss this. By noon, we had registered over 70 patients into our system. By the end of the day, that number had doubled. The most meaningful part wasn't the crowd, it was the messages. One by one, clients told us the same thing. We came for you, not the brand. Some brought flowers, others brought cookies or notes. One family even delivered a hot lunch for the entire staff. The joy in the air felt like the exact opposite of everything CareBridge had become. That night, exhausted but beaming, I received a final message from a friend still working inside Pine Hill. Emergency meeting tomorrow. Whole place is in a panic, schedule's gone dry. The following week exceeded every projection we'd made. Appointments overflowed. Calls poured in. We expanded hours, rushed orders for more supplies. By the end of the first month, we had registered over 800 pets. And Ethan, he was finally learning the answer to his question. Roughly 70% of Pine Hill's former client base had followed us to Blue Ridge Veterinary Care. But what surprised me most wasn't the number, it was how they found us. We'd done almost no formal advertising, just a small announcement in the local paper and a handful of quiet phone calls. Yet every day, new clients walked through our doors. My neighbor told me, one woman said, while I examined her Labrador puppy, "Everyone in the dog park is talking about this place." The neighborhood pet groups were buzzing. Clients passed along stories how we'd rejected price gouging, how we refused to push unnecessary tests, how we actually listened. I hadn't planned on becoming some grassroots symbol of resistance to corporate vet care. But here we were. It became clear that our mission had resonated. The contrast between CareBridge's transactional approach and our personal, transparent one had struck a nerve. 3 months after opening, I heard the front door chime and looked up to see a familiar face. Dr. Jameson. He stood in the entryway, arms crossed, his eyes scanning the reception area. "I had to see it for myself," he said with a smile. "You've created something special here, Rebekah." I gave him the full tour. As we walked through each room, exam suites, surgery, prep recovery areas, clients stopped to greet him, many expressing how much they'd missed him, but how glad they were to have followed me. As we finished, he paused by the break room door. "I made a mistake selling to CareBridge," he said softly. "I should have come to you first." "It all worked out," I replied. "You deserved your retirement." And this is what was meant to come next. Later that afternoon, a new email landed in my inbox. From Ethan Clarke, subject industry trends and Asheville market. He wanted to meet, discuss the evolving veterinary landscape and collaborative possibilities. I smirked as I typed my response. "I'm available next Tuesday at 2:00 p.m. Nothing personal, just business." I hit send, then looked around the practice. Maggie was laughing at something Caleb said. Lena was helping a nervous child hold her kitten still for vaccines. A golden retriever lounged at the foot of the checkout counter while his owner paid their bill. This was more than a business. It was a sanctuary for animals, for families, and for people who believed in real care. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's not a lawsuit, a headline, or a dramatic exit. Sometimes it's creating the place you were always meant to build and letting your work speak for itself. And mine was speaking loud and clear. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you truly. This story isn't just about me, it's about every person who's ever been told they were replaceable and then proved otherwise. I'd love to hear from you. If this journey resonated with you, drop a comment below. Tell me, have you ever walked away from a toxic situation to build something better? Have you ever stood up for what was right? Even when it cost you comfort or security, your words matter not just to me, but to others. Watching who might be standing at that same crossroads right now. Let's lift each other up. If you believe in what we're building, stories of strength, quiet justice, and the courage to start over, please consider subscribing to this channel. Share this video with someone who might need the reminder that it's never too late to take back your power. Your support helps us grow a community where these stories can keep reaching the people who need them most. And if there's one lesson I've learned, it's this: loyalty, kindness, and integrity are not weaknesses. They are your edge. In a world that tries to squeeze you into metrics and margins, don't forget that your values are your compass. Protect them. Lead with them. And if you ever find yourself in a place that punishes that goodness, walk out with your head high. You don't have to burn bridges. Just build a better one. Because sometimes the best way to get even isn't to fight fire with fire. It's to create something so meaningful, so trusted, so true, that those who dismissed you can only sit back and wonder how they ever let you go. So go ahead, tell me what you would have done. I'm listening.